Where did life come from? Despite the numerous theories and endless researches, science's reach fell short while trying to explain life. And what we usually do when we get stuck or bounded in science is to outsource the problem into fiction, to call our boundless imagination to help. Over time, this process was the foundation for creating what we call science fiction. The reason why most people, and probably you if you're watching this video, love science fiction is because it explores what we don't have yet the means to explore, because it brings to life a vision that fills our boundless curiosity and limitless unanswered questions. And one of the most important questions to us, slightly less discussed in chimps with caffeine addiction, is life's origin.
I have spent my entire lifetime contemplating the questions. Where do we come from? What is our purpose? What happens when we die?
The first scene of Prometheus was, I think, the best cinematographic attempt into that question we've ever had. If you didn't watch the movie, here's a quick review of what happened. An alien with a very similar bone structure to us, but ripped as hell and for some reason completely hairless. Which begs the question, is this just a biological trait of them, or is it common practice to completely shave in their intergalactic culture? And if it is there a stigma towards the hairy aliens among them? Do they struggle to get jobs? Do their hairy kids get bullied at school? Anyway, the alien, which is called the engineer in the movie, is dropped by a spaceship on a planet that is either Earth or another very watery planet. No one really knows. The alien then proceeds to drink some kind of liquid that makes all of his body dissolve into a cellular level while dropping into water, which seems like quite a painful process. The reason why Prometheus has such a strong fanbase among science fiction fans is because of this short sequence, because it gives the ultimate answer. That is, we're a byproduct of a hairless, very muscular, conscious life form called engineers. But, more importantly, that we were created and wished for by superior beings and not just a result of evolutionary randomness, our consciousness and intelligence being most likely the end goal of their doings. So we can conclude that the engineers wanted a similar life form to their own to exist on another planet, but what for? Why did they create us? For what purpose? The movie didn't answer those questions, which was in my opinion the best thing to do. I mean, how could they? The questions were far too big, too important to support any answer they could have thought of. It would have deceived no matter what. So they chose a blank answer, which is one of the reasons I believe that made the movie so frustrating, but also unforgettable. But there's a more important part that I wanted to shed light on. Most people who watched Prometheus, including myself, missed something from this short sequence. Or, to be more precise, didn't ask themselves a crucial question. Why did the engineer sacrifice himself? I mean, it's really odd. Maybe it's just to make the scene more dramatic, grandiose. Otherwise, why would he do that? If his civilization has evolved enough to travel into another galaxy, then surely they did have the means to fertilize Earth without sacrifice through bioengineering or whatever technologies they had. And the answer to that is that they chose to do so. Despite becoming this evolved and futuristic life-giving civilization, they still had some deep-rooted faith, tradition, that led to practices of ceremonial sacrifice, to give birth to one's death, which connects with our definition of reincarnation, and the reincarnation here is the archetype. Archetypes, according to Jungian psychology, is the common shared knowledge of ideas, concepts, or interpretations rooted in every human being's psyche. They are one of the pillars of our personality. They drive our thinking and behaviors unconsciously, and they are shared between people, which means that the same archetypes will keep on recurring in every person throughout time. Reincarnation is an idea rooted into our religious and philosophical concepts from thousands of years, that kept on resurfacing in every minor or major religion or even civilizations, that only through death can life begin. The tree on the recipe that holds the fluid is a strong hint towards that. It represents rebirth. For them to be so evolved and still do what we describe as primitive doesn't sound that likely. I mean, we've learned through history that the more we suppress our primitive instincts, the animal side of us, the more evolved we become. And surely believing in reincarnation or practices of self-sacrifice don't have any place in an evolved and civilized society. But oddly enough, no one was really bothered by the engineer's sacrifice. when they first saw the movie. We just saw it as natural. We didn't instinctively question what he did, because what he did was somehow understandable to us, in a manner that we can't explain. And that's maybe because that scene summoned something in accordance with human nature, a part buried in our unconscious, and it doesn't become something we found outrageous and bash until we look at it directly and consciously think of it, just as it happened now, as before the scene was completely okay, until we shed light on the practice of sacrifice as an isolated thing, and suddenly it becomes odd and unacceptable. So we can safely say that the unconscious part of ourselves recognizes sacrifice and is quite okay with it. We can use this as a doorway towards all the different parts that make us who we are, but to whom we have almost no access to. Those unconscious parts have so much more influence over us than we would dare to think that it makes it scary. The modern man has learned to keep a lock on some of those parts, to be part of the society and civilizations that we created, thus making him incomplete, depressed, as though something deeply profound was lacking in his life. And the biggest source of that struggle is that our societies aren't designed for human nature. This was the theme addressed in one of the best movies of our time, The Fight Club.
You do not talk about Fight Club.
The actual Fight Club was a place where man could finally reconnect with his old, oppressed parts, to finally be able to be fully themselves, to let the animal side of them finally have the spotlight. Maybe bashing other people's skulls wasn't the healthiest way to deal with that though, but Prometheus, I think, had a more healthy answer to that problem. Ridley Scott brought to life through his art his personal vision of the archetype of the perfect state of being when he created the engineer. The engineer held beliefs, although belief wouldn't be the right word, maybe the integration of the idea of reincarnation and self-sacrifice, while being technologically superior godlike creatures, can somewhat direct us to the right path, I believe, which is the acceptance of the multiplicity of our minds and integration of every part of ourselves into our societies and cultures, even the ones we would describe as primitive. The same thoughts that, if expressed today, would be described as the manifestation of mental illness, the thoughts we dare not to look at, out of fear of judgment, but more importantly of our own selves. And I'm not saying to bring back the Abraham gutting his son as a sacrifice for God type of story.
And God goes, kill your son! Dude, kill your son! And Abraham's like, you mean Isaac? I don't know his name, just kill him!
Honestly, I have no fucking clue how to create a society like that. Maybe we're allowed to punch 2 people on the face a day.
Oh, fuck. I can't believe you've done this.
Or wearing clothes outside becomes optional, and wearing suits is the new taboo thing, like who would collectively bully people with suits, and they would be completely okay with it. Psychology is a new science, and we know so little about ourselves that it would be impossible to even begin to describe what that peace of mind would be like, but I'm sure in the not so far future, people will look back and think about how lost they were in our time, and say to themselves, it took us time, but now we're finally home. We know where we belong and what our purpose is. Of course, Ridley Scott didn't have this in mind making the movie, but from where do our ideas arise? Our unconscious, of course. It quietly whispers in our ears, and those ideas can only be recognized by other unconscious minds. Writing stories is our best way to express what lies in our unconscious. So, in a way, it's like a secret language between our minds without us having any knowledge of it. A complex exchange that we help achieve and at the same time be completely clueless about.